Hi, and welcome to Nurture Your Zest. I'm your host, Ashleigh King, and I will bring you a wealth of interesting people with fascinating ideas across the tech industries, the creative industries, and also uplifting stories of courage and hope. We all go through prickly situations in life. I believe that through courage, creativity, and curiosity, you can find inspiration to nurture your zest. That thing that gets you up and out of bed every morning, the thing that lifts you up and lights up your day. So join me in the studio and let's see who we have in the hot seat today. Hello and welcome to Nurture Your Zest. I'm so excited today because there is someone that's been on my dream list to interview for a long time. So without further ado, please meet Laura Richards.
Hello.
Hi, so nice to meet you, see you. We've met.
We have met, yes, yeah.
Many times. I say meet. I feel like we're meeting new versions of ourselves because we've been through a lot in different ways.
Absolutely. It's, well, I suppose from the point where we first met, the journey from like working for other people, I'd not long finished my master's. I think we met when you were just coming off the MBA. Yeah. Then now, now where we have businesses and babies. Yeah, it's been a wild ride.
Yeah, and trying to scale as well at the same time, which is another thing altogether. So yeah, it's been a fun journey. So I love to talk to people in the creative industries and in the tech sector, and also people with inspiring stories and stories of courage and hope. So that is really what Nurture Your Zest is about. However, you are a fusion of creativity and tech, which I love. So I'm really excited for our chat today because I think there is a beautiful dance between those two pillars or types of industry, and I love seeing the creative ways we can work together in a digital way. So I would love for anyone meeting you for the first time, Laura, who are you and what do you do?
So my background is in marketing and PR, so quite traditional. Started out in broadcast media, moved more into the sort of the PR and marketing worlds a few years later. But over the course of the last sort of decade and a half, really, I feel like I found my sweet spot in this mix of storytelling, building, making, and working with other people who are doing similar things. So that has all come together quite nicely in the launch of Idea Junkies. So we are an ideas agency. I've played around with how to describe what we do quite a lot, but the idea is to help people with big ideas share those with the world. And I think in terms of like who I am, the agency name Idea Junkies comes from that idea of like having lots of interests, wanting to explore lots of different avenues, different fields of work. I think other people call it things like multi-passionates or multi-hyphenates, but it's that idea of actually you can have more than one interest, you can have more than one field of expertise. You don't have to niche down. So I think the more comfortable I get in my career and the more comfortable I get in myself, the more I'm happy to explicitly reject that idea of having to find a niche.
I think niching is so interesting because I would never in a million years have thought I would ever own a podcast studio or that podcasting would become my niche. And actually, I would say that it was the wisest business decision I've personally ever made. At the same time, I think you can have different interests. And also, if you become too narrow, you also miss the opportunity to see what is your unique selling point or your unique value proposition for yourself. So, yeah, I mean, I think niching is a really interesting one. And I know you've been on a lot of accelerators where you've had the chance to really stress test your business ideas in and out. And that's really helped to bring you to where you are today. At the same time, I know that everything in your life has contributed to you as a USP, you as the person who can lead your organization. So I am so happy to have you here. First off, Idea Junkies. I love it. So I love myself having ideas, but to me it just conjures up imagination and play, fun. So Does it feel like a passion project? How have you been able to monetize that? Because you spoke about an idea agency. I'm thinking innovation, intellectual property, unlocking those sorts of things for maybe people who can't see those patterns. Would I be right in that? Or what is your goal with Idea Junkies?
Yeah, that's pretty spot on. So I love working with interesting people with interesting ideas. But actually what I was finding is when I was offering just very traditional like marketing and PR services, I was getting to do work with them on a particular part of their journey, and then kind of having to say goodbye and starting at the same point with the next customer or next client. So now the idea is to work with people throughout the entire life cycle of their idea, so whether or not someone has got that kernel, that's like spark of an idea, and they want to develop it. So that might mean research, that might mean stress testing, that might mean building MVPs or prototypes, through to actually getting it into customers' hands, go to market, launch, and those bigger creative campaigns. So the hope is that actually we can build much longer term, much deeper relationships with clients by staying with them. If there's something that interests me, I get as passionate as the person whose idea it is, right? So I don't want to just come in for a 3-month campaign and then say, see you later. So that's the idea. In terms of monetization, so we have some quite specific services. I spent a lot of time developing I suppose our suite of products as an agency. They're not all launched yet. There's plans over the next 12 months to bring those all to market. But I'm really excited because we've got some quite unique service offerings that hopefully are going to fill a bit of a gap in the market. And some of those absolutely have been informed by programs I've been on, by things I've learned from other people and from clients. So I think trying to do something a bit different, but just trying to for me, I still want to work with interesting people with interesting ideas.
I love that. I love that you want to work with people and explore their ideas and uplift people's ideas. And I know I've followed a lot of your campaigns, working with charities, working with environmental causes. You have a lot of interests. So would you say for yourself that you have particular pillars of projects you love to work on?
Yeah. So when I'm in this process of trying to scale and starting that process of going from an individual, a freelancer, to actually I want to build out a team. I want to be able to have impact at scale. I've done quite a lot of reflecting on what it is I love about the projects that I've loved. And the DNA that runs through them all is that it's people that are having an impact. So it's people that are trying to change sometimes an industry, sometimes like a specific sector, sometimes actually they're trying to change the world, they're trying to change the law, but it's people who are trying to change things for the better in some way. And that thread runs through charities, startups, and more established sort of corporate businesses that are looking to roll out sort of environmental initiatives or staff wellbeing programs, but it's people that are trying to have a positive impact.
So where do you think that desire to be part of the solution or part of a journey or part of a community has come from? Have you always been group focused?
So that's such a good question. I don't know is the honest answer. As long as I can remember, right back to being like tiny, I have had a sense of like right and wrong, of things being just, of wanting to make things better. So I think that is quite innate. And actually I feel very privileged now that I'm in a place career-wise that I get to make that sort of the central pillar of the work that I do. I think that is an incredible position to be in.
Absolutely. And also to be in the position where you can use your voice to uplift others or uplift ideas. It's really powerful. I have a question for you. So you've been on accelerator programs. I'd love to hear more about your founder journey. But I also want to ask if you made a similar mistake to me. So I know we've both worked for big organizations and then, corporate PR kind of responsibilities. Did you do this when you started out? So when I first started out, I was used to, if I needed something, I could ring security or I could just call catering, or I would just call payroll and they'd sort it. And then all of a sudden you have to do all of these things. But I was operating as if I still had all of those resources. So I would create these long systems and processes as if I still needed to, and not having the agility as an early founder. I quickly learned about that. But I wondered, did you ever experience that sense of, well, I need to do it the right way, or the processes need to be in place in the specific way? Because some people just go straight into entrepreneurship, and some people have other experiences that they bring to the table. So did you ever do that, where you felt you had to kind of have every process in place?
Yeah, I spent early on, I think, in working for myself full time, spent time trying to make sure I had a lawyer that I could call, and a finance person I could call, and an ops person. Because there is that, I suppose, almost like a hangover from working for more established organisations of, there is a right way to do it. I think I was quite lucky that I have also been immersed and surrounded by startups for like the last decade. So I've also seen people being scrappy and being results focused rather than process focused. So I think I feel like I caught it quite quickly. I also think there is a place, and sometimes what startups and sort of early stage businesses get wrong is not looking at what works and not having processes in place. So you end up reinventing the wheel time and time again. You have to do the thinking every time you need to do a particular process. So I think there's a balance to be struck. I feel like hopefully I've hit that balance now, where I have a business manager that looks after some of the ops and some of the process stuff. We have an accountant that looks after a lot of the sort of the bookkeeping. We do have a lawyer that we can call so that if there are things like contracts that need to be reviewed, and that has on at least one occasion, having a lawyer and knowing that actually certain things probably should go to legal before I sign them, has on at least one occasion stopped me signing a contract that actually had some quite difficult terms, and it could have ended up in for the business quite a difficult place. But actually, by having someone who was able to read those, was able to go, actually, look, we should at least ask if they can cut this out. We should push back on this. We ended up with something that worked for both parties. So yeah, I think there is a balance to be struck between doing things the way that everyone else does it, where you lose that agility and you lose that flexibility and you lose the competitive advantage of being a startup. And actually, sometimes you don't need to reinvent the wheel. You don't need to disrupt payroll, right? Like, you can just pay someone. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that is a really good point. I just see it all the time, especially we both have a marketing and PR background, but this idea that, you've got to have the most glamorous website and you've got to have this and that, and you've got to be a member of this committee or group. And actually, sometimes you just need to get your head down and meet clients or tell people what you do. I think that's one of the biggest things I see for myself, is actually just telling people, this is who I am, this is how you can work with me. So I love that you've now got this really clear offering. We're an ideas agency. We can help you innovate. We can help you look at your IP and also protect your IP, which is what I'm hearing around those contracts. Yeah. Because I personally feel, coming from the creative sector and coming from a startup background, there is a lot of naivety around intellectual property, and I think sometimes creatives think there is no intellectual property to protect, but it's all that stuff that's in your mind and all of that consultancy stuff that you do that actually is really powerful. We've started to really look into this recently, and it's a unique journey I've not come across before, but it's really inspiring actually when you start looking around and think, hey, that's IP. It becomes quite fun to play that game.
Yeah, and I think if you've got a particular way that you do something and you've always done it that way, and that's been developed over a few years, that process can be protected. That can be trademarked. I don't claim to be an IP expert or a trademark expert, but those things can become something that has a much more tangible value to your business. And just to come back to what you said about sort of like the way that this is developed, and particularly coming back to the point about having a shiny website. I still don't have a website. I started the process of working for myself full time 3 years ago, and actually it's taken that long to figure out what I want to do for the next 10, 20, 30 years, right? Like to start with. And I think particularly in the creative industry, particularly with freelancers in the creative industry, I always feel really frustrated when I see people early on feeling this pressure to pick a niche, feeling this pressure to define what they do. It's okay in the early days of a freelance career to take the work that comes your way, to like you have to pay bills, right? And over time, and you don't need to wait for a website to start. You don't need to wait for like the perfect logo to start work. You can just get started. Yeah. And that way the brand almost develops quite organically around the stuff that, like your zone of genius, the stuff that you love, the stuff that you do better than anyone else. And I think there are so many people who, you probably have the same conversations as I do. People that would love to work for themselves, people that have these business ideas that want to freelance or to launch something, but it's like they're waiting for permission, and they're waiting for, well, I don't have the money for a website, and I don't have the money. I'm just going to work another couple of years to save enough money to pay for the branding agency because they've said it's going to be this much money. To just start. Like all you need is, you can start with an Instagram post or an email to someone that you think would benefit. Like it's really, for me, it gets really exciting when you think about what's the smallest possible thing I can do to get started.
I love as well the idea of taking people on the journey. So that is where you can be a living idea junkie. You can be a living laboratory, and you see people do this with podcasts sometimes, but which artwork do you prefer? Which set do you like? It's kind of inviting people in to become part of the journey. I saw you do that actually with what are the top podcasts that I should find out in the Northeast, or it's that kind of community participation element. I would love to hear a little bit about your experience in the entrepreneurial startup hub communities. What lessons do you have from those spaces?
Oh, so many. I have a handful of people that I have been lucky enough to learn from over the years, and their voices are like still in my head. I still hear the phrases, the lessons. Starting small is probably the biggest one. Getting started, like you could have the best idea in the world, but if you don't share it, if you don't put it out, if you don't take action, like it's never gonna be more than an idea. Getting things into the hands of your customers or clients as quickly as possible is another one. You want to be testing your ideas with real people. There are a handful of exceptions, companies that do need to build in stealth mode, but most people aren't going to nick your idea as soon as you tell them it, because they've probably got their own idea that they've been thinking about for the last 10 years that they think is going to be their big break, right? Get something into the hands of your customers. Start. So the phrase, the sort of the movement I love is building in public, right? Start building it in front of, build an audience as you're building your business or your product or your idea, your app, whatever it is, because that way you get that, you shorten those feedback loops. And then I think the other big thing that I learned, and this comes back to this idea of like personal confidence and self-confidence, was that it's essentially it's okay to be an ideas junkie. So the name Idea Junkies came from this sense I have had and things people have said to me over the years about, oh, you always have shiny object syndrome. Oh, you're a bit of a magpie. Like, oh, you can never settle on one idea. And for years that felt like a criticism. It felt like a personality defect, right? Like I should just pick a niche. I should just pick one thing that I'm going to do for the next 10 or 20 years and commit to it. And I have absolute admiration for anyone that can spend a decade working towards one goal. That single pursuit of a goal, I think, is incredible. I have a podcast myself, and actually a lot of the people I am interviewing are those people. They are people that have spent sometimes decades pursuing a particular idea and working to get that out into the world. It's incredible. but it's also not me. It was off the back of, so I was lucky enough, I joined a program. It's not available anymore, not going anymore, but it was called On Deck. So the On Deck fellowships. I joined one of those during the pandemic, and it was the first time in my life that I was surrounded by, I think there were about 400 of us on the program from all over the world, by hundreds of people that were pursuing multiple ideas. People that had started, some of the people that were being held up as like heroes of this community publicly talked about the fact that they had tried 90 different startups and only 3 of them had ever worked, right? Like it was no longer seen as this negative. And it was going through that process and surrounding myself with people who didn't see this multi-passionate pursuing different ideas as a negative that made me realize that actually I could flip that narrative I'd been telling myself on its head and embrace the fact that I am an absolute idea junkie. Like I love hearing about new research, new products. Like I want to be the first to try things out. Like if you've launched some cool new gadget, I'm probably going to buy it because I want to see what it does and is it going to change my life? And like I'm absolutely going to be an early adopter, and I want that to be part of my career as well. I want that to be part of my legacy. So, learning to accept that the way that I think and the things that interest me aren't going to be the same as everybody else, but that can also be valid. It doesn't mean you're not going to be successful. That was huge. And again, I think it was probably only a couple of years ago that the word entrepreneur was something that that was never a label that I saw as like applying to me. But when you do join these entrepreneurial communities, there is something amazing about meeting people that have had failures and they don't shy away from them. They don't see that as a negative. It's all just part of the journey.
Yeah, absolutely. And that opportunity to flex and bend and that agility. And I think sometimes being in a safe space where you've got people around you to not only cheer you on, but also we spoke about stress testing, but to challenge you, to have the black hat, to give you different perspectives and continuous feedback that can help your idea change. Would you be able to share anything about your investment journey or what it's like to be a female founder in the tech industry?
Yeah. So again, that was never something that I thought was going to be part of my journey. And it's taken a couple of years, I think, to get comfortable with the idea that like I am someone that is still trying. I have a couple of things that I am building and testing at the moment. But there is someone that I could be someone. I could be a tech founder. So it was, and I have shared this with Joe York, who was the CEO of Ignite. The Ignite program. I have been aware of Ignite. I have supported Ignite for best part of the last decade in whilst working in-house for other organizations. And then when this round of programs launched, I had an idea for something I wanted to build. I'd started playing around with no code, so I suddenly felt that I maybe could put something together myself without needing to find a developer that I could partner with. So I was considering applying for the Ignite program, and Jo had like office hours, so she'd kind of put out saying, if you want to have a quick chat before applying, you can. And I must have gone to cancel my call with her like 5 or 6 times because I suppose imposter syndrome was so high. I'm so glad I didn't, because I got accepted. I joined the pre-accelerator back in 2022. The idea I started with absolutely wasn't the idea that I pitched on demo day at the showcase. But I learned so much from that process. And actually what I ended up with, I think, was something that the marketing industry still needs. It's something that I'm really pleased to see a couple of other Ignite alumni now looking at. There's a couple of other companies looking at the same space, which is fantastic. But my journey took a little bit of an unexpected turn. So following the pre-accelerator, I'd hit a point where I had a pretty solid idea of what the problem was. I'd started exploring some possible like kind of tech solutions. But this was back before OpenAI made it so easy to build with AI and things like that. So I was at a point where I was going to need to raise some pre-seed investment to build out a working MVP. And 10 days after the program finished, I found out I was pregnant with twins. So I again must have gone to put the phone call off to Joe 5 or 6 times, but ended up calling Joe. I was like, I just feel like I want to talk through this with you. I've just found out I'm pregnant with twins. I don't think I want to start a fundraising journey right now. I don't think I've got that fight in me. And if I'm honest, it felt like it was going to be a fight, having seen what female founders go through, knowing the stats on what VC funding typically goes to female founders, let alone non-technical female founders and a solo founder. It didn't feel like my fight. So it was it was something that I sort of shelved at that point. And I think in hindsight, it was the right call.
And I think it takes a lot of courage to actually say, you know what, I could raise investment right now, but for me and for my body and for my family, I'm going to prioritize myself. I actually feel the same. You know, I am in a position now where my business is scaling, and it's really exciting. And it's exciting because it's been bootstrapped. So every penny, every wall has been painted, you know, it's been a lot of upcycled furniture and a lot of love all hours of the day and night. But then when you have a family, you can't all of a sudden be still at the studio at midnight painting, because you've got I was going to say a 3-year-old. I haven't got 3-year-olds, but you've got a baby on you, you know, that you're nurturing with your body and this kind of thing. And I think being a female founder has been such an interesting experience. I'm so grateful as well that I have had that experience. There are times where I've thought, well, in past jobs, I would have had such a cushy maternity leave. But actually, I think it's made me really value the time with my daughter, because she's been in nursery quite early on, just as a necessity. But it's also meant that I've learned to be more efficient at work, and it's forced innovation in my business. So you're right, there are founders out there who are amazing, that I forget her name, but there is an awesome woman who raised a lot of investment pregnant with twins. But I think it's also trusting yourself that you can deliver what those investors need, and I myself couldn't make that commitment when you don't know what your family will need as well.
Yeah. In any founder that's thinking about whether or not you're going to raise venture capital versus bootstrap, part of your decision should be, who do you want to answer to, right? Like, if you're bootstrapped, you've got the power to make decisions. You've got the power to take your foot off the gas if you need to. We see it all the time, businesses that take on VC funding and then change quite dramatically overnight. And that, again, that wasn't something that wasn't something that felt like it was. The phrase I kept sort of coming back to was, it didn't feel like my fight. I absolutely think women can raise money when they're pregnant, because no one asks a male founder, are you expecting kids? Yeah. Like if a male founder is expecting kids, it's seen as, they're going to be more motivated. They now have something to work for. It's one of those areas where there is absolutely complete double standards still. And I think the founder of Wild AI, I think, is one of the founders that's raised money recently whilst pregnant. We've seen things like the Alma Angel Summit, where women were pregnant and talking on stage, female founders taking their kids. The work that Alma Angels are doing, I think, is incredible in this space, providing childcare at conferences so that parents of any gender can still attend. Should just be the norm, but it
should be the norm. And yes, it makes it more expensive for tickets or as a cost to that. But I mean, imagine
you can sell more tickets.
Yeah,
like it should work itself out in the wash, right? Because more people can attend, so you get better attendance. So yeah. But so I have such admiration for anyone that's done it, but it for me, it didn't feel like my fight. And I think there are so many things there are so many causes that you could choose to dedicate time to. Knowing when it's not yours is important.
I'm with you there. I went through a similar thing in previous years where I was spending a lot of time. I advocating and being an activist in particular for particular causes. And then I sat and I thought about it, and I was like, this isn't my fight. And what it was is I was doing a lot of work, anti-racist work, and, you know, advocating for a lot of communities and musicians or creatives who were of colour. And I realised actually it linked to being South African, growing up at the end of apartheid. There was this deep shame. And actually, when I realised that that was the driver, it helped me to see that maybe sometimes I was taking up places that weren't mine to be or to take up. And it was a really painful lesson, but it taught me so much. And I think this is where having those lessons for yourself and being curious. I mean, one of the things about being a multifaceted idea junkie is that you have that curiosity to explore and follow the creative dance wherever it goes, you know. So, I mean, that is, yeah, I do think being able to flex and change is important. Now that you are a mum and you're a mum to twins, how is it affecting your work life? And I'm so sorry that I'm asking you that question, because I've been to so many conferences where these questions always come up, but it's true. You know, how is your mental load? How are you tackling it all?
With a lot of help, I think, is the honest answer. So we are very lucky that we've got family on the doorstep. So we've got a lot of family involvement. Any new family with babies, extra help is welcome, but quite literally, when you've got two, you just need extra pairs of hands. So we're very lucky that we've got grandparents that are very involved. My husband and I, we're again very lucky. My husband has Tuesdays and Thursdays off, so now that I am back working, we have the ability to juggle work between us. He works on a Saturday, so again, that's a day that I do a lot more of the sort of the load. But the I suppose the parental load is genuinely an even split. There's now the boys go to nursery 2 days a week, so that helps. And that's actually made a big difference to me. I think because that is the same every week. That's not affected by grandparents getting sick or like other things coming up. That has, in terms of sort of my ability to schedule, to plan, to just know I've got some protected time, that's made a big difference.
And to go and speak in London when you need to, which you're doing a lot of speaking and things like that.
The logistics of the logistics of trying to get to events and stuff. It's that old saying, isn't it? It takes a village, but it does, because before I can say yes to anything at the moment, I've got to check. Like, I speak to my husband to see whether or not there's like what he can do, if like, does he need to change his days off? Then it's like, right, actually, then speak to the grandparents. Can there be an overnight? Because obviously, if you've got to get a 5 a.m. train to London, it's not just the day, that's actually the end of the night before. So it's like, right, is a sleepover bed? So it's like, yeah, it's a military operation trying to get to these things. So I think part of it, and it's a bit, I think you alluded to it before about being more efficient, just become far pickier about what I say yes to. I probably won't be going to socials on an evening. Probably won't be meeting people for coffees unless there's a really clear purpose, or because actually on the days I work, there's roughly 5.5 hours of good work time. So it's about being really, really clear on what the priorities are.
That's one of the things I love that my friend and former podcast guest Jenny Smith taught me, is that go to a networking event and plan coffees around that. I'm with you there. When I first started out, I was doing coffees left, right and centre, but the cost of all the coffees, it can be a whole thing in itself. I also learned that a lot of people are business development managers who are in a paid position where they get paid to drink coffee and develop business. But if you are starting out, you can't just do that. So I had one of my first assistants actually put me on a networking ban. It was the most powerful thing she ever did for my business. I, at one point, was networking 8 times a week. And I look back now, I was actually doing my MBA at the same time. So I was going to a morning breakfast event, and then a lunchtime event, and then an evening event between classes. So, I mean, it was great. But then when do you read your papers or do your work? Late at night. And you can only do that for so long. You do burn out.
Yeah. The other thing that I've found, so even cutting back on in-person events, the other thing that was taking up a lot of my time were calls.
Yes.
People who want speculative calls.
Yeah.
I had something recently where I'd posted about something that, not something I'm delivering, but something that I thought my clients and startups in the region might find useful. I posted about some funding that was available. And I had people asking me for calls to talk them through the funding. Now if that was one person, that might be okay. But they weren't asking about the funding to then work with me.
Yeah.
They were wanting to work with other people.
So you're doing the work for those people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, like there is like that's not on anybody else. But that was the catalyst for me to realize that actually calls are the same as networking. There needs to be a purpose. I need to know beforehand what you're looking to get out of a call to save us both time. And actually what I've done now is I typically now schedule all my calls on the same day of the week. So I have a Monday, I catch up with clients, I catch up with colleagues, I catch up with, if people do want I've got this thing and sort of speculative possible business development type calls. Yeah, that's fine, because Mondays are blocked out for calls. And actually what that then lets me do is do the deep work, the thinking work, the stuff that needs uninterrupted time and concentration on the rest of the days throughout the week. And then I've called them Fun Fridays. So I've also benchmarked, sort of earmarked time on a Friday for the projects that I want to work on. So those ideas that occur to me, the things I want to test out, the stuff I want to build, that now happens on a Friday. So again, my headspace is free the rest of the week, not to be constantly thinking about that toy that I want to build or that tool that I think would be really helpful.
You've got a safe place, like a test bed day. Yeah.
And that, again, that's really helped in terms of getting more done in the short space of time that's now available.
I love that. I'd like to know, for anyone starting out in tech or as a female founder, do you think the industry's changed from this broke culture idea? What tips would you maybe give them? And yeah, what would you do differently if you could go back and tell Laura 10 years ago?
So I'll start with I'll answer those in reverse order. I actually don't think I would say do anything different. It would be more, if I was going to give my younger self advice, it would just be to trust that if it's interesting, if it's something that I want to work on, it'll probably lead to something good. I don't have many regrets in terms of steps I've taken in my career. I think they all, there's a really lovely accumulative effect of things that you learn and people you meet and knowledge that you gain. But in terms of people starting out now, have things changed in tech? Yes and no. So there's just been a survey released that showed that 9 out of 10 female founders have been sexually harassed, right? That's still prevalent now, still happens now. That's not old stats. VC money still goes predominantly to white, middle to upper middle class men. There is still a lot that needs to be done. It can still be lonely and difficult and unpleasant if you are a female founder. What has changed is that there are so many more networks. There's so much more support. There are so many more female founders that maybe feel like it's safe now to start sharing their stories. So actually, if you're starting out, my advice would be find local, find somewhere where there are other women doing what you're doing. Female founders Rise is doing stuff up and down the country. Alma Angels is brilliant. If you're looking to raise investment, find a local female founder and follow them and connect, and just don't feel alone, because actually there are definitely places out there now to join. I would also say find an accelerator program or like a cohort. Find a place that you can go, a co-working space even, where there are people that you feel like you click with and that you feel like they're your people, because that will help. Reach out. I'm happy if people are listening to this and they're like, yes, but I don't know where any of those people are. I'm happy to connect with people on LinkedIn and always happy to make introductions. I think anyone that has gone through any of this, any of these shared experiences, I think understand that actually sometimes a friendly ear and a welcoming sort of a LinkedIn inbox is sometimes all it takes. But yeah, try and find other people that are doing the sort of thing that you want to do. Yeah, get along, because those communities they've been set up deliberately to be inclusive, to that is conscious, that is embedded in everything that they're doing. So they will be welcoming, they will have open doors for you, and just get out there and try and find your tribe.
Absolutely. And also that eagerness to learn and enthusiasm. I mean, one of the guests on this series, she reached out to me about 4 or 5 times, Instagram, emails, LinkedIn. Hey, can I meet you? I want to learn everything about podcasting. Hey, can I meet you? And it was so cool, because I am someone who's not always on top of my messages, and it's never a personal thing. I just get a lot of messages. But the fact that she kept coming and she kept asking meant that I was able to say, hey, sorry about that. Come on in, let's have a chat. And, I was able to meet a really cool colleague and friend through that. So I think also the tip I would give to anyone is ask and ask again, because people are busy and they're not ignoring you. They just got stuff on their plate.
A lack of response is not a no.
Yeah.
With my podcast, this is the thing that really landed for me. I have some incredible guests. I've been able to have these conversations with amazing people, and some of them it took 5 or 6 messages to get so there was one guest, and I won't say who it was, but we'd met in person at an event. They'd said yes in person. They'd given me their contact details, so all the signs looked good. And it's taken about 6 months to get to the point where we've got a date in the diary. Wow. Because they're in demand, right? Yeah. Their schedule is genuinely busy. Mm-hmm. And actually they've had no issue with me continuing to nudge just those reminders. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but it took, so I think I tried LinkedIn, email, LinkedIn, Instagram, X, and then I had to circle back. Then did the LinkedIn thing of commenting on things that they were posting, liking stuff to try and make sure I was visible.
Be first point of call.
And then continuing with the follow up. And it's absolutely worth it. And it was never a no. It was just they actually hadn't processed, or they hadn't seen the messages. So never take a silence as a no. Yeah. A no is a no, or a no is probably just a not now. Yeah. But just keep going.
Yeah, I like that. That's great. Okay, so I have a question for you. I ask everyone. What is your number one way to nurture your zest? Actually, I want your number one word. So how do you light yourself up to give you that spark to get out of bed in the morning? The thing when you feel hopeless or lonely or lost. What is the thing that gets you back to yourself and your zest?
So we've actually already talked about this, but it's curiosity. So that would be the word. That would be that's
the same one as Herb Kim, actually, I think. Yeah.
That doesn't surprise me if you think about the range, the variety of people that he has speaking at the TEDx events and things digital. But yeah, the staying curious is both how I keep going professionally. It's where my hobbies start. My hobbies are also an Idea Junkies hobby list of hobbies, right? I've got tried lots of things over the years. But staying curious, following that spark of, ooh, that's interesting, always leads somewhere. It always leads somewhere good. You always find out something that you didn't know before, or you meet someone interesting, or some of those ideas tend to stick, and then they lead into bigger things, or they kind of connect with something that you've already read, or whatever it might be. But yeah, curiosity.
I love it. We are a podcast for the creative and the curious, so I am delighted to hear that's your word. Thank you so much for coming on today.
Oh, honestly, thank you so much for having me. It's been so lovely chatting.
Thank you so much for listening to Nurture Your Zest today. If you're feeling extra kind, it would mean so much to me if you could share this episode with your friends or family, or anyone who you think might feel inspired by this content. Liking, sharing, or interacting with our content is a great way to support us as content creators, and it helps us to bring interesting stories and more people to you. This podcast is a Flamingo Heights podcast studio production, and I've been your host, Ashleigh King. If you liked today's episode, follow the video on your screen now, or check out the link in your show notes to find similar content.